So here's the first thing I wanted to ask you, because I think that Corey and I realized that most people have trouble posting. They just don't know how to get started. I think some people are naturally gifted, like we were talking about, kill it, but other people have trouble even getting started. So what do you think holds FAs back from being more active on social media?
You know what? I think it's a lot of different factors. And one of them I think is frankly just inertia. So it's probably all the same stuff that keeps me from doing that workout regime that I keep talking about doing. It's a lot easier not to and just kind of keep going with what you're familiar with. So that's one of them. And then I think there's just a lot of other concerns that folks have. It's things like, hey, I don't really understand the technology, or they don't think it's going to move the needle and it's a huge time investment. They don't think it's going to be worthwhile. And then of course, in our industry, there's the big compliance fear that a lot of folks have that, in their experience, there's just a lot of things you can't say. They don't want to get into any trouble. So it's just easier just not to get involved.
I agree. And that's interesting to me. And it always was interesting because specifically, especially from the LPL standpoint, they're extremely flexible as a broker dealer in terms of what you're even allowed to do. So I'm surprised a lot of people aren't taking advantage of that fact and taking advantage of the openness they have, because there's some advisors who aren't allowed to post on social media almost at all. Not even pre-approved posts, just not at all. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I am definitely on my soapbox a lot with our LPL advisors, just making sure they understand that competitive advantage, because you're right. A lot of other firms do not allow their advisors to post with such flexibility. And we have a compliance tool that our advisors use called Social Patrol, and it's pretty advanced in terms of the technology and what it's able to review. So our advisors can actually go out with video that they've just filmed on their iPhone and immediately publish it out to social media. And Social Patrol is able to kind of break that content down to review it in real time and archive it automatically. And that is totally overwhelming to a lot of folks. They just can't believe it. They think they're going to say something they're not supposed to and going to get into trouble, which isn't the case. And also I would say at LPL, our compliance team is just great partners with advisors. They're willing to work with you, give you recommendations in advance, and also just kind of let you know if they do have to take down some content, educate you on kind of why, and help you be more proficient at that going forward. But I think it's just sometimes a little overwhelming for a lot of folks to think about that.
Yeah, I bet that when advisors make a transition from one BD or one, being at one firm to another, coming to LPL, I imagine they're excited about all the availability or all the marketing flexibility they have, right, going to LPL. And then when you get there, there's probably a little bit of like overwhelming, like you're saying. It's just like, I don't even know what to do with it. We weren't used to doing this here. Now I can do it here, but it's just easier not to start.
Yeah, and that's why we try to give them some tools too. So I understand, first of all, it's carving out the time, and you're not going to carve out a lot of time to begin with, maybe just a little bit to dip your toe in the water. So we have tools like a social media content library that they can use to just grab some pre-approved content and click that share button, at least to have something out there to get them started. But absolutely, I think it's overwhelming at the beginning for a lot of folks.
Yeah. And there's familiarity with it too, right? If you haven't done it somewhere else, just coming to LPL, it's hard to turn that switch on and kind of get in that frame of mind of being that person on social media.
Yeah, definitely. And I would even say that, a lot of folks, if they're intimidated by the technology, what I like to impress upon people is it's the social part that's the most important. The technology is really easy to learn. So the harder transition, I think, is if you're not really into networking and that's not your strength, and then you're trying to apply the technology to that, I think you'll have less success. But if you're already good at being out there in the community and you apply that same skill set, the technology is easy to learn.
Completely agree. I think it just feels overwhelming. I always wondered that, and I think it just feels scary, and learning anything new takes a lot of time, and you wonder if it's going to be worth it and what's the payoff. And when you start calculating, I think then you stop, executing and stop doing things, trying new things, and it's just about getting out there. I know a lot of advisors who have trouble doing a video because when they edit it, they'll watch themselves and they go, I don't like it anymore. And then to get them to go live on Facebook would be like, forget about it. And so I think a lot of people already connect and already fun in their own way and different. I always just try to push just to try to get something new.
I mean, you got to start somewhere. And I think that, one of my favorite LPL corporate values I talk about is this idea of progress over perfection. And so I think for a lot of folks, it's helpful to say, listen, I can relate to this firsthand. When I first started creating videos for my social media, it's super uncomfortable. I think when we watch ourselves, we always see our flaws. We see those little things that drive us crazy about ourselves. Other people aren't really seeing that. So I think the hardest part about getting started is that courage to say, okay, I'm comfortable enough seeing myself in this video to put it out there. But you have to do it. You have to start somewhere and understand that over time you're going to get better at it and the quality is going to improve. And so, progress over perfection is all about, don't worry about it being perfect right out of the gate, because I think you'll be really surprised at the support that you get. I have been at the support I've gotten from my existing network. And the people that I'm connected to, especially on LinkedIn, are more likely to kind of like and comment on and share my video content than the stuff I just kind of share from pre-approved sources. And then with that, it expands my network, and it frankly allows me to meet people like yourself who then see that content, connect with me, and you can build new relationships, which is super important because we know right now, especially, that's really hard to do. We're not out networking.
Yeah, right.
Is the best way to do that.
I was texting with an advisor last night, Sarah, and him and I were talking about social media and posting, and he was asking me why his stuff never does well, and I'm trying to be, I'm trying to tread lightly with it. But the bottom line was his stuff is just overly complicated. It makes you think. You read it and it's like it hurts your head, and it's just like I'd rather scroll on. Right? There's just too much data in what you're posting. And he said, I took a minute and created a photo that I thought would be a lot of fun, and I posted a video, and crickets. I got no response. What are your thoughts? And I think that's a whole separate issue, is when people do get the courage to be them and get out there and put themselves out there, and then there's no engagement, it's deflating. It's defeating.
Yeah, you know what? I often say too that you got to be patient with it. It's that progress over perfection. You're going to learn. So if you're getting crickets from your content, then there may be a reason why. Maybe you need to test different subject matter, different lengths, different topics, and go from there. Because listen, I think social networking online is very similar to social networking offline. So if let's say you join a networking group, like you join your country club or the small business association in your town, and you show up to the first meeting and you go, well, I didn't meet anybody, or I didn't meet any new leads. You're not going to just quit the group, because it's only your first time, and it takes time to build relationships, to figure out what's important to the other group members. And that's the same thing with social media. It takes time. So you got to be patient with it. And think about it like, I think a lot of people are familiar with the concept of the sales funnel, right? There's also now content funnel. It takes time. You got to bring them in at the top of the funnel, make them aware of you and what you do. And then the more content you share, the more they get to know you, the more you build that relationship, and they're nurtured down to the bottom of that funnel until they're ready to reach out. They have a question for you, or they need an advisor. I
really like that. You don't just jump into the country club or the first time you're meeting people and start jamming with content or really deep insight right away. It's how are you, who are you, what you're about kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah, and I also think that conversation is important. One of my sort of broken record things I say all the time is don't forget the social part of social media. If you're just posting content, that's just media. So you need to remember it's a conversation. Just like you wouldn't walk into the country club and stand up on a table and just start yelling things at people. You don't want to do that on LinkedIn. You want to go out there and see what other key folks are talking about and comment on their stuff and engage in the conversation, because it's those online conversations that are more likely to turn into offline conversations. And that's where you win.
I love that.
I always say that. If I also have a mantra that would attach to that, it would be to bring your online relationships offline. Call somebody on the phone, do a meeting like this, meet somebody in person. I've already been networking with a bunch of the other all advisors really, but a few specific LPL advisors that we were talking about before. We're all talking about when COVID feels comfortable again, for all of us to meet in a certain state where we'll probably go to Maryland or something like that. And I'm sure we're going to try to do like an epic LinkedIn video if we can. But we're definitely going to get like a group and just meet people that I've never met before, only people I've had these conversations, and you never know where things are going to go. And that's the fun that I think comes with the marketing that a lot of people should take advantage of. That's the social part that you talk of. And that's really the stuff that keeps me going. Obviously, I love the engagement. I love people asking me questions about finance, about marketing, but that stuff comes slowly. So I think you need something, some social aspect of it to keep you going. And that's where I push people to really be open and do that engagement, because it keeps you locked in, it keeps you consistent.
Yeah, it's personal brand, right? People like to do business with people they like. So you want to make sure they like you, and content like video content and things that you're writing that are interesting or different. Frankly, a lot of the advisors I've worked with get the most engagement on stuff that's not even financial. It's a picture of the dog who's sitting at their feet as they're working from home, and it's relatable to a lot of people. And that's sometimes what can start a conversation. So you got to let
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100% agree. I want to pop the questions up, but I like not having them there. I kind of like just doing the general conversation. But one of the things I did want to ask you, especially, is what you mentioned in the email. I wanted to jump into exactly what you're saying in terms of where we are in terms of COVID, in terms of communications, and we touched on this a little bit, but how has marketing communication changed in the current state of the world?
You know what? I think pre-COVID, our marketing consulting team at LPL was, evangelists of digital marketing. But now it's essential. I mean, a lot of advisors are now, getting off the sidelines with it and saying, hey, I've been putting it off. I can't put it off anymore. You have to have a web presence. You have to have some type of social media or some digital way to stay in touch with your clients. So folks who maybe used to do seminars, they're having to learn Zoom and do webinars. So the majority of the consultations we've had in 2020 have been around, how do I get better at social media? How do I do webinars? What are some best practices around that? And then also, especially at LPL with the social patrol capabilities, video. So how do I do more with video so I'm staying physically in front of folks? It's been huge here.
And I apologize for not bringing this up earlier, but I'd like to know a little bit more about what specifically is your role at LPL and then the team that you have with you.
Yeah, sure. So at LPL, our team is called Marketing Consulting. I lead the team. And, we are really just there for our advisors and our institutions as sort of like coaches. We can answer basic questions, do tours of our tools and resources because we have a lot. So sometimes it's helpful to get the breakdown, but also those one-on-one consultations, which are super valuable that folks can set up anytime. It's free for our advisors. So they reach out to us a lot for that type of guidance, recommendations specific to their practice. We also just share a lot of general best practices in the form of monthly blogs and webinars. We have a bi-weekly podcast series that the team just launched a few months ago during COVID called Fireside Chats, where it's just quick little 10 or 15 minute deep dives into certain topics. But
yeah, I love those.
Coach. Oh, thanks. Good.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you guys as a team have found success with that has been inspiring to you guys in working with advisors through the consultation process?
You know what? I think it's really helpful just to frankly have those one-on-one conversations. I've been in this role for over 11 years. So as you can probably imagine, I've learned as much from our advisors as they've learned from me. So being able to apply those best practices and things I've heard from others to share that with advisors as they kind of go through the coaching process with us has been really helpful. And then also just practicing what we preach has been huge, Corey. So, we like to make sure if we're talking about blogging, we're blogging. If we're talking about we're doing it, right? So that we can learn from that experience. And personally, going out onto social media, sharing video content, which is, trust me, just as uncomfortable for me as it is for a lot of our advisors getting started, has helped me learn about that experience too. So we try to pass that on to advisors.
So 11 years, I'm trying to think back. You caught the end of that templated brochure period, right?
In our industry, the templated brochure goes on quite a bit. So I think people are still kind of looking for it time. But I remember
the templated brochure and then the website template. And now we've moved on to just being a little bit more creative and using some of the channels and mediums that we have now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an evolution.
So do you feel like once COVID started, did that change did that change the internal conversations in LPL for everybody to be saying like, look, we need to be giving advisors more one-on-one information. We need to be having these consultations. And like when you guys figured that out, are people taking advantage of it? Are people who don't usually post or do, are they reaching out for consultations, or do you feel like people are even afraid to get started doing that?
A little of both. I would say certainly, we've been kind of beating that drum for marketing consultations for quite a while. And I think certainly at the beginning of COVID, we had a huge uptick in folks reaching out and taking advantage of that who maybe were a little bit reluctant or putting it off previously. But I honestly think there's still a huge untapped audience out there who either are not aware that we have these services or are still kind of not sure that they want to get going with it. Because we're a relatively small team. We have 17,000 advisors at LPL and only a couple of folks who do the consultation. So in my view, we should be, back to back every day.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
So why wouldn't we do it? But it's not the case. So I wish more people would take advantage.
Yeah. What's the most common thing that you guys deal with, Sarah? What's the most common inbound question that you guys are getting?
Right now, it's all digital. It really is. It's, what resources do you have? I think that's where it starts is what do you have that I can use that's already packaged up and pre-approved to get going? That's probably number one. And the second conversation we have after that is, okay, so I've been doing that, but maybe it's not as effective as I'd like it to be. So how do I get better at this? And how do I bring the authenticity to that experience?
Yeah.
What do you think people could use to get started or put the work into, I guess, excel from that pre-approved content? What are those steps that you tell them to do to push the authenticity in there?
I honestly think that analytical approach is not a bad thing when it comes to content creation. So something that I would recommend, a couple steps for somebody who has that mindset, which by the way, I do, I'm definitely more of an analytical type, is to have a plan and map it out. And a lot of folks really are able to be more consistent when they do that. So what do I mean? Well, sit down and brainstorm either with yourself or with your team and brainstorm some topics that are top of mind for your target market. What questions are your clients asking over and over again? Or what do you wish more of them knew about? Or some of our advisors are actually reaching out to their clients to say, hey, what keeps you up at night? And turning their answers into content. So once you have kind of a brainstorm list of topics, you can start to plan out, when are you going to share that? Realistic, and be realistic, right? If you're not comfortable sharing a video every week or every other day or whatever you think you're supposed to do, you're probably not going to be consistent with it. So pick something you can be consistent with and just get started. Some of our advisors that I've been talking to lately are recommending time blocking for content creation. So that's another best practice is just set aside maybe a day, a month, or a half a day and create a lot of videos at once. One of our advisors was saying she sets aside, a couple different outfit changes and changes up her hair a little bit and just spends that day creating maybe like 10 videos. And then from that, she just sort of slowly releases them over time. So you can take a methodical, analytical approach to it and still have success.
I think for some of it you have to, and I say that because setting up the whole production, thing can be just a task that you're like, I just don't feel like it today. But if you're committing to it and it is set up, then take advantage of it and film and create as much content as you can while it is set up.
Yeah, and speaking of setup, I'm just going to show you my setup because it doesn't have to be very complicated, right? So, the setup I have for those who are listening to the podcast is a simple tripod, and it usually has a ring light on it, but I took that off recently. But, it has a ring light, it has a tripod, and it has this little clip that holds your phone. And it's like $30 on Amazon. And that's what I use. That's my equipment. So you can move it around wherever you want to be filming for that day. It has a Bluetooth remote so you can start and stop your camera on your phone remotely. So, I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that you don't have to have expensive, fancy equipment. You don't have to have a production studio. Something like a $30, $40 tripod with a ring light, that's all you need. So keep that in mind too.
Mm-hmm. But it does help to have hundreds of dollars in lights.
Yeah, I know a few. I know a few people in the LinkedIn feed that might disagree with that.
Some of our advisors get really into it. Yeah. But here's the thing: is I read this great book. It's called How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck is the name of it. And it's written by this guy out of Hollywood. I think his name is Steve Stockman. So I recommend it for anyone looking to get started. But his key message is, in the preface, he's like, look, I'm not going to talk about equipment in this book at all. He's like, that's because don't get bogged down with equipment. It's not about the quality of the video. It's about the quality of the content. The content has to be great. So my suggestion is focus on that. And then once you get the hang of that, your content is humming and you're getting lots of engagement, then if you're really into it, you can think about upgrading your equipment.
For sure. Yeah, don't show up to the golf course unless you can, with all the new stuff and if you haven't swung the club before,
Exactly. Good point.
Yeah. I think the other big thing is because just like you said, it has the tripod has like a holder for your phone. A phone takes really good video these days now, and being able to post right away and being able to throw it up on YouTube and maybe get some captions. I mean, there's a very quick way to be able to distribute content kind of at speed and kind of at scale. And good content if you get good at it. I know sometimes it's scary for people to just be like boom and post, but again, I think that comes with time. So just like you said, I really push we always push the same thing, talk about the same thing. Don't think about the equipment. And I think that leads into overthinking in general. How do you think you stop the overthinking and slow people down and just get them started?
Analysis paralysis is what we call it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It definitely happens. And just kind of going back to my networking analogy, it's kind of like you're standing at the edge of that doorway. And in that room is all the really influential people that you want to meet and talk to and be in front of. And you're just kind of standing back because you're not sure what to say. And that's a huge missed opportunity. So I say, I know it's hard. I know it's challenging, but walk in the room, do it. And I think you'll be really happy that you did it. Just start somewhere. And the good news about your content, whether it's written or video, it doesn't have to be long. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed that they think they have to have some huge message or story. You really don't. So a best practice that I've learned is just focus on one simple thing that probably is obvious to you and not obvious to your clients and prospects, and just record maybe like a 1-minute video. That's all you need. And practice with that. Don't stand in the doorway is my advice. Walk in the room, because if you're not willing to do it, someone else will. They're going to walk right past you, and they're going to be building those relationships while you're missing out.
Yeah, I'll take that a step further too. I'd say the longer the content, the harder it is to have it consumed and engaged with. Our attention spans are, micro at this point.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere the stat is like a goldfish's attention span is longer than a human's. It's like 8 seconds, and ours is like 5 seconds or something like that. So yeah, long content is tough to get through. And also, I know they say don't use yourself as an example in marketing, but I mean, do think a little bit about how you're scrolling through your own feeds, right? What are you stopping to look at? And start paying, conscious attention to that, because most likely it's going to be compelling images and interesting videos and stuff that's hyper relevant to you and what you're interested in. So that's my other tip here we haven't really talked about yet, which is knowing your audience and making sure you're aware of what's going to be really interesting to them. And they say the riches are in the niches, right? So what is your niche market that you can hyper target that's going to get their attention? And I'll give you an example from this year during COVID. We have an advisor who was targeting folks in the airline industry. And so when a lot of those folks were being offered retirement packages, he put out a video, and it had a lot of airplane visuals and a lot of text on the screen that talked about airline industry and retirement packages. So if someone was in that situation, that would catch their eye, and they would stop and look at it because it's hyper relevant to where they are. And in his video, he just kind of talked about his tips for whether you should consider taking that package. And then of course, a call to action at the end to, hey, reach out to me if you have questions or want to talk about it. Super valuable to be that hyper targeted.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yep. I've even seen somebody, and I'm not sure if it was the same person, but they had the title right in their LinkedIn title, which was like United Airlines Retirement Specialist or something, where they're like talking to that specific group. I think you get in there and you start seeing his content. Obviously you're that person. You start to focus. We actually just had a long talk about this, about niches and focusing. It sounds like obviously you believe in that wholeheartedly. How do you think people find a niche in a world when they're not sure or they're just getting started? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's hard for sure. And, I think there's a lot of traditional ways that advisors think about niche markets. So a lot of the pushback I get when I'm trying to coach towards that is folks saying like, well, I don't want to just work with doctors. And you don't have to think about your niche in that way. There's different ways that you can think about your target market. And one of our advisors who's had a lot of success with social media calls his audience a niche market of the mind. And that's because, he has a certain way that he thinks about investments and that he communicates. It's kind of, he's in Louisville, Nebraska, so it's very, colloquial, and his clients kind of know his voice and how he speaks. And so they connect with his content very easily. And if you don't connect with that, if his voice doesn't resonate with you, well, then you're probably not part of his target market. So I think the key is to really just define sometimes a mindset of your target client. How do they think, what's important to them, and try to craft sort of a persona around that you can market to.
I love that. Yeah.
Any other mediums or platforms, activities that you're seeing, Sarah, that folks are having success with that might even be on the traditional side, but in the current environment that people are having success with?
It's a best practice that I suggest is a multi-pronged marketing approach, because each one of these communication platforms is not successful in a vacuum. So I always like to mention that too. It's not just I have a social media strategy and that's what it is. I would say experiment with different forms of communication. But again, here's where you want to think about your target market specifically, and where are you going to best be able to interrupt them with your communications?
Yeah, interrupt's a good word.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's so many people, different experiences when they're starting. Like some people are having getting started because they don't have any ideas, and some people are a little bit nervous. And it's just finding those things to get people going. And I don't know, I've been trying to figure out ways to push people myself, and that's why I like to ask about your conversations with advisors and go into this and wonder, what you can say or what steps people can take. Sometimes I try to do a mindset thing and keep it high level. I think Corey does an excellent job of saying, here's the little bits of actionable advice. And sometimes they take neither. So I'm always looking to push people, because I find that I'm not even critiquing their social media strategy. I'm just trying to give them one. Like, I'm just trying to give them some type of presence or get them started on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's helpful is to show examples and show what other folks are doing and show that it's attainable, and talk about their success stories and their results, because that usually helps kind of nudge them in that direction. It's useful to see that, hey, it really does work. Because like we said at the beginning, that's one of the big hurdles, is people don't feel like it's going to be successful. So you got to show them that it is.
Ryan, I don't have any other questions for Sarah. I do want to pick your brain a little bit, Sarah. Whenever if Ryan has more questions, we'll go through those. But I want to pick your brain kind of off the track a little bit.
I think we actually touched on every question. Is there anything else, I guess, Sarah, that you wanted to hit? I think a lot of it's a lot of little things, and there's so much to talk about with marketing. I guess you could go for hours and hours, but do you have anything that is specific you think we didn't touch on that can really help people either hone in their strategy, get that niche, get started, or whatever you think those big hurdles are for advisors?
Well, the one other thing that popped into my mind earlier when you were talking about the person on LinkedIn who kind of had in their title about United Airlines is, remember that the social platforms have algorithms just like Google. And so there's certain things that you can specifically do to help make sure that you're more visible within the platform and that your content is more visible. So things like having a very specific niche in your title definitely helps. Sharing content more often. And if you're writing a blog already, typically I think best practice that we share as marketers is put it on your website and then share that link out on social media to drive website SEO. But I'm a little bit of a contrarian on that, so I often recommend that you publish your article also directly on LinkedIn, because only something like 0.2% of the 700 million people on LinkedIn are publishing articles on the platform, and most page views to LinkedIn are to content. So they really want to reward authors and make you more visible to your networks. So just some tips there. Just think about the frequency with which you're posting and how you're sharing out content to make yourself more visible on the platform.
I love that. I think you hit two huge points there, which was repurposing content you already have and posting organically to the platform, to letting the algorithm take it and do what it's supposed to do. Two things that I hammer all the time. I see a lot of people sharing their YouTube links to their LinkedIn pages when I just say, if it's under 10 minutes, take your video and upload it organically, and and then let it go from there. And I think it shows a lot better, and I think people stop it in the feed, and people on mobile and their desktop can watch it, because even though I think Corey and I talk all the time, it's primarily a desktop, LinkedIn being a primarily desktop platform. A lot of people watch it on their phones too. I have my phone out all the time. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's also good for your LinkedIn SEO, if you will, is native video. Same thing with Facebook and Twitter. Native is when you're publishing it directly onto that platform, and they value that content more. So for sure, they want to keep you on there as much as possible.
Exactly. Right. Mm-hmm.
Sarah, thanks for taking the time to chat with us. I totally appreciate it, and I know you probably have a lot going on, and it's it is only 9:30, so I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, this has been really fun.
Absolutely.
I'd love to know, out of curiosity, like, when you wake up and there's a post from some of the guys in North Carolina, are you like, oh boy, like, what do we got today? Like, how does this all go? Because I'm thinking of a handful of people that, without naming names, that do a really good job at creating these little micro media companies within their formal business.
Yeah, you know what? It's all about personal brand, right? And so for some of those folks who get real creative with their LinkedIn videos, there are other advisors who reach out to me and say, is that okay? Should I really be doing that? And really, I never use the word should in marketing, right? I feel like you should only do the things that are going to be representative and authentic to you. So for those individuals, and I think I know some of the ones you're referring to, they are very creative. And that's been successful for them. And if you talk to them, they have real results that show that their creativity with their content is moving the needle. And that's great for them, but it's not going to be for everybody. So be authentically you, whatever that means.
Do you guys internally at LPL and the LPL marketing team, do you ever use some of these people as examples of what you could do, or do you stay out of it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It depends on the conversation and where that goes. As you guys know, as you're talking to somebody, you can get the feel for how far they want to push the envelope with their content. So, I pull different examples for them based on, where I think they should go and what their comfort level is. But yeah, for sure, we use other advisors as an example whenever possible, because that definitely helps to see what's working and what others are doing. We use them as examples as panelists on breakout sessions and on webinars when we can, because we know there's a ton of value to that.
Yeah, and another thing that kind of stands out to me is, I'm not a rep or a former rep or coming from LPL. I'm coming from a different world here, but the fact that just based on what I can see in the LinkedIn feed specifically, the best financial services or advisor marketers come from your firm, which is kind of neat. That's pretty cool to think about, even considering RIAs don't even have a lot of the restrictions that most of the BDs do have.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm super excited about that. Like I said, I think to your point, RIAs have a lot more flexibility, so I'm surprised that they're not kind of dipping their toe more into that water, but our advisors certainly have an advantage with that social patrol capability. So, we continue to beat that drum and get out there as much as we can to help encourage them to take advantage of it. So I'm glad to see that that's the perception out there.
Yeah, keep it up. You're doing a good job with it.
Social Patrol was the best thing to improve it, besides ClientWorks from BranchNet. Obviously, that was a huge leap from the advisor standpoint, but Social Patrol was the thing that I think at least made me feel comfortable start branding, engaging, and doing that much more. I'm amazed more people don't push for that, and more broker dealers aren't looking for opportunities like that, that people out there like Social Patrol are there, and they're hiding under the net of just don't do anything, and we feel comfortable with that. Go grow your business. It's an interesting aspect, I think, and that's the reason I think LPL does better. LPL advisors are doing better. They have the flexibility and the creativity, so you're seeing some of it come out from the advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Social Patrol capabilities, some of it is, frankly, we talked about fear that advisors have with getting going with compliance, but there's also fears at the company level, the corporate firm level as well. And I think a lot of that is if you are in control of your brand, like let's say, I don't want to name anyone by name, but let's say everybody operating under your organization, is using the same brand. Well, then you maybe don't want your advisors out there representing the brand in a non-controlled way. But because all of our advisors are independent, then they have the ability to build their own business and grow their brand. And so we want to make sure we give them as much capability and as many tools as possible.
Yeah, it's a great point.
If there's anything else you wanted to add, obviously, but I was more than happy for you to spend some time giving me your experiences, especially from inside, because you talk to hundreds, thousands of advisors. I mean, I'd imagine that you specifically are hearing the same conversations over and over and really finding out pain points to advisors and how to help. So that's why I like to hear your experiences.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I also participate in our home office visits when we have recruits come in to learn more about LPL. And over the 11 years, marketing has become a bigger part of that conversation for sure, because one of my other sort of broken record topics that I talk about is that I think the future of marketing in our industry is a content battle. Because at the end of the day, I think this will always be a referral business. Someone's handing over their financial future to you. They have to trust you. And that trust a lot of times comes from the reputation of a friend or family member who is recommending you. But what's happening in this digital environment, in this virtual workplace, is that 90% of people go online and they're searching for you. They want to find a website at a minimum, but they're also comparing websites, they're comparing content. So the more you have that they can learn from in the form of blog articles, original content, video content, so they can get to know you during that research phase, that's what's going to set you up to be that advisor of choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you agree with them or not, everybody knows Susie Orman and people like that, Dave Ramsey, just because they spent the time marketing, spent the time branding themselves, and they're household names, whether you want them to be or not. So it definitely works. I guess that's part of the success stories. Whether you agree with them, they're there, and it's the proof. Yeah. Again, thank you so much for being here, Corey. Do you have any other questions you wanted to add?
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
You too.